Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another Fluent Talks. Really excited to continue doing these. This is our fifth or sixth one, so this is pretty fun. Today we've got some pretty exciting stuff. We got Pat joining us here from the Clipgia team. We're going to talk a little bit about Red Hat certifications and OpenShift for those who are using it. Talk a little bit about how to send data from OpenShift for those who are familiar with it. And even give kind of a demo of some of the solutions that you can send data to. So, something that's been a bit more popular that we've seen is like Grafana Cloud. And we'll give a quick overview of that to talk a little bit about it and go through it. So with that, Pat, I'll turn it over a little to you, talking about the Red Hat certifications and what's going on over there.
Thanks for that. Obviously, we've done a little bit about OpenShift on previous talks, but we just wanted to have a quick catch up because there's been a few new things recently, and also I've been working on a little blog post about how you can use FluentBit to send metrics and logs from OpenShift to various backends. So we'll do a demo of Grafana Cloud, but we've also got things like Datadog, Elastic, Splunk, all the big ones in there as well. And it's probably good point as well, because in the last, I think 2-3 weeks, OpenShift 4.10 came out, which has quite a few updates, but also it actually syncs quite nicely with FluentBit 1.90, which I think came out maybe the same week. I can't remember exactly. And we've obviously also got that as a Red Hat certified image into Red Hat Container Catalog. So you can consume it directly as a certified image. Obviously with OpenShift as well, you can consume the open source images if you want, but this way it's properly certified and it's all built on top of UBI and gets all the benefits of following the nice Red Hat supported stack. And actually, talking about certification, something recently that Red Hat has changed. So what normally happens with OpenShift certification, and it was something I was going to do a blog post on, but good I didn't because it's slightly changed, is you set up your Git repo to build your container. You can either build it yourself and push it in to Red Hat Container Catalogs where they scan it and verify it and check a few things. Or you can get Red Hat to build it themselves in their environment, which automatically does the scanning and verification for you as well. But that was kind of limited a little bit in that, it doesn't really integrate with, like we're already building loads of stuff in GitHub Actions. Why do we have to then have this whole separate other thing where you have to go in and manually tell it to rebuild things or build a new version or whatever? And also it didn't support ARM64, which is, FluentBit out of the box. The open source one supports AMD64, ARM64, and ARM32. And you're seeing more and more, ARM targets. So recently, and it's something I've used when it was in private beta at my previous company, but they've made it public beta now as well, is that they've provided this sort of pipeline now where basically you run the checks and stuff yourself and you upload the results, and you upload the container image as well. They verify if the results are accurate and all that stuff, but ultimately it means it feeds, you've got your CI/CD pipeline already set up. You're making these images, because that's what I do. All the images are made first, and then we push them to Red Hat to build them again. And there's no real need to do that. So it feels like it should be a nicer integration into CI/CD. So you can just plumb it in at the end.
One question, because I'm actually not as familiar with it either, is there's this idea of certification for containers, and Red Hat certification for containers with OpenShift. I think maybe two questions I'll load here is, one, why? What's the need for it? Why do it? What are the differences maybe between a regular container? And then I know, Pat, you've done a lot of work with like government and others. Is that something that like folks really look for, or like if you're trying to service, government or other high
Yeah.
classified environments, this
Yeah,
might
yeah.
be.
Well, maybe not just government, but things like financial or anywhere where you need compliance. Basically, I know compliance is like double quoted as
Yeah.
like a term that means quite a lot of things, but you get things like FIPS compliance and stuff like that, and you have to, you know, essentially it's about following a process that is well defined, well tested, and reproducible, um, and that's what it's kind of guaranteeing. There's other benefits as well, like so part of the certification process requires you use a Red Hat base image. There's benefits to that certainly when you run on the platform in that everything's running a common base image. You're only loading that base image once, and it's easy to update for vulnerabilities, to scan for vulnerabilities. It's all got common infrastructure in there, so you can hook in loads of other stuff without having to go, well, this is running Alpine, this is running, Distro-Less, and all these different, like, how am I going to integrate this tooling, those kind of tooling as well. So that's some of the benefits of certification. It kind of keeps you in a kind of nice integrated stack. You follow, if you're certified, you have to have met certain criteria, like export compliance is one of them we've been having fun with the last couple of weeks. But, saying if someone uses my image, they're not going to run afoul of some kind of export law or licensing issue or something like that. There's packages in there that are compliant to whatever the specific needs are of that compliance process. Some of it's export, some of it's security, some of it will be, maybe process driven or some other aspect that you need to audit. So there's quite a few things there. And part of the certification process is it does tick off some of these things. There's some best practice stuff like don't run as root, make sure your packages are updated, those stuff you expect to be in there. And then there's other stuff that make sure you've got all your licenses included, stuff like that, which is like, oh, that's a pain. But actually, if you're going to deliver something commercially, you kind of need to do it. And you need to know that if I consume this thing, I'm not opening myself up to risk. I've brought this thing into my environment. I've become dependent on it. Oh, it turns out there's some kind of legal issue with it, or aspects like that. It's all about trying to say no. When you consume these images, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
And one of the other things we looked at as well is with some of the FIP side and those kind of things. There's like you need certain versions of like OpenSSL. They need to be built in a certain way and stuff like that. And it kind of guarantees that you've got that to say. You can't automatically be certified just because you're using it, but it's part of that kind of stack to say, tick that box. Now I can then go, right, everything below me is certified. I just need to certify myself rather than I need to certify myself and everything down and prove it to a security auditor, which can be very difficult sometimes. What else is in certification? Paperwork, mostly. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, besides the paperwork, I think the only other piece that I know, and I know, again, very little, is like UBI containers versus Distro-Less. And I guess one thing I would point out too is like, okay, if you don't have certification, all of a sudden are you exposed to all of these like issues, etc. And I think one thing that we've done with FluentBit is try to make sure like Distro-Less containers, for those who aren't familiar, it's like image created by Google. You don't have a shell. It's try to minimize the footprint, or I'd say the attack vectors that you could have with an image. And so with that, you don't have to really, you can't even run a shell. You can't really gain access to it, which is a blessing and a curse when you're trying to debug some things for sure. But it's not like if you don't use a certified container, you're all of a sudden at risk. It's just these certification check marks adhere to some very specific piece that's here with Red Hat. But yeah, maybe UBI, if you could touch on that real quick.
Yeah, and actually that probably, so previously I did a post on thanks to Tim for the little meme generator, but like we're talking about how we can improve the open source multi-arch images, because like we were saying, we were using Distro-Less, but we were only using it for AMD 64. The ARM images were like full shell,
Oh, they
they were
were.
basically,
Oh, I didn't.
yeah, they were basically debug images. But that's changed in 1.9. This is part of what this blog post was about. And actually, there's a good blog post by Red Hat on the two different approaches to um, um, securing your
Oh, okay.
containers. Now, obviously, this is written by Red Hat based on this is the way we're doing it, and these are the decisions we've made. So it kind of goes into like what the UBI image, why they make the UBI image. So UBI image, for those who don't know, universal base image. So it's basically a version of Red Hat's container image that you can consume and use for free. You can redistribute it. You don't have to license it. Those kind of aspects. So the idea is, if you want to build something in open source, you can use it, and people consuming it don't need to worry about licensing. And there's a really good blog post that kind of goes through like some of the issues with Distro-Less. I mean, if you go back to my blog post, I do try and call out kind of what are a competing view, I guess, is the thing. There's the things that Distro-Less, UBI, whatever are trying to solve. That there is a common problem. It's about securing it, making it small. Is the short gist of it. So there's different ways of solving that problem, and they each have trade-offs. And so there's two blog posts linked from my multi-arch one, which kind of go through. Here's kind of the Distro-Less view. Here's the UBI view. And what they're trying to achieve and why it works. So, I think Distro-Less is probably quite a good solution. UBI has some benefits as well. You've got your package manager, you can easily update things, stuff like that. But there's also downsides to both of them. Like with Distro-Less, you don't have a shell. Is it as secure? Is it as secure as you think it is? Is one of the things. It's still, when we're making the Distro-Less image, I can still whack a load of packages in there and stuff like that. But when it's running, don't just assume because it's Distro-Less that you can't do stuff. No, you can. There's still exploits and attack vectors that you need to worry about. There's just less of them.
Yeah.
And it's kind of one of the benefits of either stack, of like having that common like minimal image, is like, if something does happen, we just update the one base and it sort of fans out to all of them, rather than everyone making their own kind of secure approach and having to patch it 10 million times, like with Log4j or something like that.
Yeah.
So there's quite good. I won't go into it, and I don't necessarily entirely agree with both opinions in the blog post, but I think they're quite a good read. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, sounds like we need another blog post on Pat Distro-Less versus UBI and
it's all
Pat's
opinions.
thoughts.
Yeah, it's all opinions.
Yeah, exactly.
I think. Yeah, it's like my I don't want to get in trouble. They've also got it's probably one for another time, but there's the UBI micro approach as well, which is kind of it's a trickier one to explain, but like, when you use it, to get packages into it, essentially you pull them in from the host, and there's some extra work to do because it's all focused more on like rather than Docker, it's using some of the open source tooling that Red Hat is a big proponent of, like Builder and Podman, to make your images. And there's different ways of making them. And then you've got other approaches like build packs and stuff like that. So there's about a million ways to skin the same cat. So there's quite a lot there, but Red Hat have chosen this approach, which is to do the UBI. If you want a certified image, it either has to be UBI or a Red Hat base image, and a Red Hat base image would require some kind of subscription or license or approach to that. I think now they change their licensing all the time. So last time I looked, to stay in the support boundary. So if your organization wanted support, you needed to make sure all of your Red Hat stuff was validly subscribed. So if you start using Red Hat images, you need to make sure the host they're on is subscribed as well, and things like that. So it gets a little bit confusing. But if you're using the UBI one, don't have to worry about that. It's kind of, I guess the idea is like, as well, like if you're going to make, like if we look at Fluent Bit, we're making, we're making two images now. We're making the Distro-Less one for 3 architectures, and we're making the UBI one for one architecture, but we can make it for the others when they're available. Why not just make the UBI one and push that to, Docker Hub? And that's the kind of, I think is the kind of positioning around it. It's like, well, you're going to have to use the UBI one to get certified. So if you want to be certified and you want to deliver to open source, why not just stay with the UBI one and you've only got one thing to support rather than two? So there's, that's, I imagine, their positioning.
Makes sense. Okay, on to OpenShift.
Yep. So in the last couple of weeks, I've been pulling together just some. It's specific to OpenShift, this, because there's some aspects to OpenShift that slightly, you need a little bit more configuration to get access to your logs and stuff like that. But the back end here, like the stuff, once it's in for a bit, if you want to send it to Grafana, Elastic, Datadog, whatever, it's still the same. It's the same configuration for that, regardless of whether you're in OpenShift or not. So actually, you could use this guide like, oh, I want to integrate with Grafana Cloud. Here's a worked example of how you do it. It just happens to be that we're getting the input from OpenShift, but you just have to arrange so you get your input from wherever you need. And for me as well, one of the big things I have, because I'm getting old now and I forget stuff, is that I try and do everything as code now. So this example, it's linked from the blog here, down here, in fact. And we've got examples for Elastic Cloud, Datadog, and a couple of other helper directories. But I'm just going to show you the Grafana Cloud one later. But I've got a nice little, I'm using the Helm chart as well. So this is the open source Helm chart. In this case, I'm using the certified image, but it will work with the uncertified image as long as you allow that into your cluster, or it's available in your cluster. And that's probably, in my previous life, I worked in defense. And one of the big reasons why we stuck with Red Hat and why I went with OpenShift and stuff like that, the Red Hat way, is it was pretty much the only solution that documented how to do things offline. There's a lot of stuff that says it is possible to get offline, but it's not documented. And I did a Red Hat forum 2020, I think, November 2020, where I kind of went through some of these problems we have and how my policy at the time was, if it's not documented, it's not supported. I need to support this for 20 years, 20, 50 years, whatever the lifetime of the project was. And it's like, yeah, I can figure out how to get your thing offline, but I'm effectively evaluating it. And like, if it doesn't work straight away, right, I'll just move on to the next one. And Red Hat was really good for that. The documentation is like, you want to deploy it offline, here's all the things you need. Now, there are still problems. We had a big problem with OpenStack at the time with some of our storage. And the only way to debug it was to go get a load more images. And every time you had to go get more stuff, it was a day turnaround, because you had to burn it to disk, you had to scan it, you had to then walk into the Faraday cage, load it into another machine. And yeah, it was just a nightmare. So it was like, I don't mind downloading a lot of things in one go and getting it all done, but I really hate the dependency spaghetti that sometimes you have, and you go and get one thing and it will need some dependencies at build time, some at runtime, some if you enable some other aspect, and it's like, I just need everything in one go. So that was one of the benefits we went with OpenShift as well. Going back to your previous question about why you might want that and why you want certification as well. And then, yeah, certification for us as well at that time was like, essentially proving that stack. You're saying, I've got all these components, I know their provenance, I know how they're built, I know they're correct, and I don't need to go and spend effort myself verifying them. I can transfer that verification that Red Hat have done and just focus on my aspects. And that is kind of, so you might have a better solution, but it's not certified, and it's just like the effort of getting it and verifying it and supporting it and maintaining it is just like, no, whilst it may be better, it's easier and less risky to go with the certified route. So that's kind of the approach sometimes. Yeah. But back to the blog, yeah. So yeah, I try and follow the policy of everything is code. So basically here, I've got a nice little walkthrough of what you have to do. So I'm using code-ready containers, which I'll show you briefly in a minute, but which is just a way of running Red Hat OpenShift locally. So effectively, it runs a VM with a single node in it for the whole cluster. So it has some, it's quite good for development. Definitely don't use it for production. And yeah, it has some other downsides as well. You're running all on a local machine. You're going to be resource constrained. There's lots of problems there. But for the purposes of testing and demonstrating this, it's a nice quick, like I can start it up and I can just delete the VM and start a fresh one. And I know it's all from scratch, it's infrastructure as code kind of thing. So that's what I'm doing. And we've talked about code ready containers previously, so I won't go into too much detail, but it looks like OpenShift basically. There's a big warning at the top saying don't use it in production, as I say, but it's got pretty much everything. There's some Red Hat documentation explaining what it hasn't got. It turns off a few things by default, like monitoring and stuff like that, because there's no point. You've got a single node. Why would you run monitoring of that one node on the same node? If it's not working, it's not working. And it consumes loads of resources as well. But one of the main things we have to do with OpenShift is that because it's generally a more secure set of defaults from a Kubernetes perspective, the main thing we need to do is get access to the host logs. I'll also show you how to get access to host metrics, because obviously FluentBit does metric exporting as well. So I'll show that briefly, but yeah, that it's the same stuff. And Red Hat OpenShift has this concept of security context constraints, SCCs, which are effectively a security profile for your application. So you have like restricted one, which I think might be the default one, which is like you can do general container stuff, stay inside your container, but you can't do a lot of the privileged access. So things like being able to mount a directory from the host opens up various vectors to exploit if you're trying to attack the system. So that's not allowed by default. But obviously FluentBit wants to read those logs from the host. So what we have to do, and I sort of walk through it in a huge amount of detail, is enable that kind of host volume mounting. So we want to say, take this path on the host, so /var logs, containers and pods, and allow it to be mounted into the container. And there's a good bit of documentation in Red Hat on like how to do this, but for me, I don't like reading docs, so it's good I wrote one. I basically what I did is, so Red Hat provide a FluentD kind of logging stack at the moment. So I just deployed that and then sort of not reverse engineered, but figured out looked at what it was doing to set up its permissions and replicated them.
Nice.
It just because it's also like best practice. You
Right.
could turn on everything, which is quite easy to do. Run as a privileged thing, as long as you've got admin privileges to do that. But that's not very good. And really, your ops and cluster admins should go, no, you don't need to run a log forwarder with like full privileges to the whole system. That's ridiculous. You just need to be able to mount host volumes, maybe secrets and stuff like that. It doesn't need to run as root. It doesn't need some other capabilities. So you kind of drill down to all this. And it's actually quite nice. It took me a while to get there, but I was like, surely it's got the security context constraint, the SCC, and it's just allocated to the, I want to run these pods with that SCC. Oh, no, don't do it that straightforward. What it does is allocates it to the service account, and then the service account is associated with your pod spec, and then when your pod spec runs, it runs with that service account and gains the privileges from the SCC. So it took a while, a bit of a route to get there, but actually it works quite nicely because it means I can, if you wanted to, you could quite easily assign it to more pods in that same namespace or however you wanted to do it. And so this is like the full what you need to do: create a service account, bind it, set the SCC up. But I wrap all that up for you into just a simple script up here. So we've got service account creation, which just spins the YAML for you. So you
basically,
can,
uses that YAML, pushes it. And this is, again, the same one that FluentD is using with like when you get OpenShift, it includes FluentD by default. These are the permissions. So anyone
Yeah.
using
So
this, it probably
yeah.
come by
So
default.
so what I did was I installed that, and then I ran RPods with its FCC to make sure it worked, and then figured out what it was doing. So obviously you could just do the same, but it's like I don't want to install the whole FluentD stack as well just to get access to a bit of YAML. So we figured out what it was and like parameterized it by namespace and things like
Very
that.
nice.
So this and for all the examples, basically I use that same thing because it doesn't matter what you're sending to, as I said before, you just need access to the logs. So if you're sending to Datadog, if you're sending to Elastic, it's just the same stuff. Because like with FluentBit, it's a pipeline multi-in and multi-out. So we just need to configure the input side, and then we get to the next stage and we look at the output side. So back to the Grafana one. And then you need to configure your output for Grafana as well. And I'll touch on the metrics in a minute, but it's not very difficult to send stuff to Loki. It's slightly more difficult to send it to Loki outside the cluster, but not that much more. So I parameterized it again because I wanted just to provide these as a .m file, just so I can quite easily change the username and obviously not detain it in a Git repo for everyone to hack into. And then we're just using the Helm script as well to deploy it all. So you can kind of see, there I go, I'm creating that service account. I add the Helm chart, so it's just the default ones for Fluent. So it's got the Fluent D thing in there. And you might notice I add two slight different variants of it. Now, the reason for this is that if you've got a slash on the end, when you add it, it will fail because it conflicts. So I try adding it without the slash and I try adding it with the slash. Just in case you've already got it, it just goes out, I'm already there, that's fine. If it's already there with the slash and you add it without, it will error out. So it's a bit different. So this script is intended to be like, I can run it a million times, I can run it from scratch, or I can run it already installed and it should still work. And then we just do a Helm upgrade. And I was talking to you about this before, actually, Anurag, about you can just provide multiple values files. So we set up the service account, and then I've got the values to access the host logs. And then at the end, I've got the values to send to Grafana. And the idea being I can just reuse this values file for all the other ones and just change the output values. And I don't just have one values file and I'm copying and pasting part of it and changing the other part. So I'll just show you the other values file. It's thrilling, I'm sure, to see some YAML. But it's very straightforward. The bit at the bottom is not really very important. It's the bit at the top that you want. So we match up. So when you use the Helm chart, so this is very specific to the Helm chart. This is the YAML configuration for the Helm chart. But it's got options for creating a service account for you by default. You don't want that because we create our special one that's associated to our SCC. And then you've got some security context stuff. Now you want to run as specific users. So the actual logs that you mount from the host are accessible by root only. There's some SE Linux stuff which you might need if you're running with some additional security options. And then there's some best practice stuff there as well, like make the file system root only, and also allow us to escalate our privileges to root, because that's what we need to read the log files. So that's all it is. I'll show you what I had to do so this, I spun up CRC a while ago. It's running 410 somewhere. Where does it say? Yeah, 410, there we are. So it runs a VM for 410 and does everything else for you. So it's quite nice. And then you get your nice, you've got your web UI, which is all, here's your console, here's the passwords, all those kind of things. Obviously, you can kind of see, this is not for production, but it's all there. So now we want to just deploy. I've been testing, obviously, before the demo to make sure it works. But if so this is our Git repo. That's just the one I was showing you before. And I'm just going to use the script to deploy it. So I've actually got my environment file with all my super secret credentials there. So it just simplifies it for me. And it's the same for you guys. If you want to use this, you can just say, right, I'll go get my Grafana login, put it in the environment file, and it will just get automatically included for you. So it prints out a lot of stuff. I'll try not to show you my credentials. But yeah, there it is. There's lots of stuff there. So that's Helm deploying. And if we go back to the pods, I'll get it stuck in FluentBit logging, just, because it's easy. And we can kind of see what it's doing. So there's a lot of debug because there's a lot of logs. So these are all the logs for the cluster. Now, I cover it in my blog, but this really stresses my local machine out to try and run a cluster and also monitor the same cluster in a VM that's running. You can kind of see there's quite a few logs there because it's running the control plane, it's running all the workers all on one node. So it's pretty stressful for the single node solution. Then we can go to so this has just started up. You can kind of see it's only just started. Let's see what's the details. How long has it been running? Somewhere created 1 minute ago. And then you've got all the events and stuff like that. But it shows you there. And eventually it will struggle and back pressure will start building because it just can't handle the full set of logs all on my lowly laptop while I'm running Zoom as well. So yeah, we'll see in a minute. But it's good enough for a demo to show you that logs are getting in. So this was a while ago. So I'm in Grafana Cloud here. I logged in a while ago. Let's see if it's still logged in or I need to re-log in. There we go. We're getting some logs. You can kind of see them. Let's see if we can jazz them up anywhere. There we go. So these are the logs coming from OpenShift at 7:36, which is the time now in the UK. And you can kind of see it's coming through. If we wanted to put some nice filters on there, it would be nice to get them in, is this an info level, stuff like that, which we could probably do quite easily. And you could do it on the Loki side as well. And you can kind of see my older tests are there as well. So it's showing you what's going on, and we can even stream them live if you want. They're coming in. You can see all the logs, and you can do all the the Grafana stuff you want to do with it, set up dashboards and show it all there. But the main goal here is to say, look, we can get logs in. This is how you do it. It's very simple, and that's all just from running that one Helm script. And one other thing I wanted to touch on. Go questions.
Well, I was going to say this is logs. You slightly mentioned metrics, and maybe I'm getting ahead of you there. But
yeah. So something, in case people aren't aware of, and it's probably something we need to publicize a little bit more, that FluentBit doesn't just do logs. It's an observability tool. It does metrics, and hopefully soon I'll pester you some more, Anurag, but hopefully we'll get the traces as well. But we can get metrics in, and I'm just going to do host, node exporter metrics, basically, which let's have a look, which is one of the metrics inputs that we can use on FluentBit. So node exporter metrics, there we are. And essentially this gives you all the usual node exporter stuff, but you don't have to run node exporter. You're already running FluentBit to collect your logs. It can collect your metrics as well. Why spend any more effort or run a whole separate stack that you've got to maintain and version separately and all the integration that goes with it? Just use FluentBit to do it. And it's very similar to logs. I mean, to get access to host metrics, you need access to like the proc file system, basically, mostly. And so that's what we do in one of the other examples in here. And it essentially all it's doing is generating you a node exporter metric that uses a custom directory which we mount from the host, and then we can use that with Prometheus remote write output So to export it to Grafana Cloud or any Prometheus server or something that supports the remote write protocol quite easily. So that's what my Helm chart is doing at the moment. If you look in the Grafana Cloud one, you can kind of see it uses the values from the metrics access, which is just mounting the relevant bits in the host. And
from a security context side, do you need any different permissions for logs and metrics, or it's essentially the same?
I did not know, because I think,
oh, nice.
Yeah, it would be nice. Well, I didn't find a good way of effectively, I need access to the host logs, but I don't need write access, or so I can mount them as read only, but it'd be nicer if you could, that's on me to do it rather than the security context to enforce it. As far as I could see, I couldn't see a straightforward way of doing it. And it's the same for you just want to read the data. So I think when I set it up, I make sure it's a read only mount and stuff like that. But there's nothing that I could see that stops you making it a writable mount. But it'd be quite difficult to write into proc, but I mean, you could do it, and it probably is an exploit and stuff like that. But no, there was no, the security context for getting access to the logs is the same one for metrics. There was no extra work required because you're just mounting something from the host into the container, basically, if you look at it in simple terms. The Grafana Cloud one. So when we do the output, you saw it before. So I've created a separate file to include, but we use the Prometheus remote write, and then we can kind of see here. This is Grafana Cloud again, but using Prometheus, and you can see I've run it twice before. Let's see. This is just showing you
it sends the info. Kind of heartbeat.
Yeah, so you've got all the other stuff as well. CPU seconds is probably a nice one. So you've got all the jazzy stuff. Obviously, you probably tidy that
dashboard.
Tidy that filter up a little bit, but it kind of shows you some of the power of it. And if we had more labels here, which is normally how I'd use it, have labels for file and level or something like that, you could start doing some nice filtering and stuff like that.
Actually, one thing I know is, so this is all 1.8.12, if I'm not mistaken, and 1.9 we include a Prometheus scraper, and I wonder, I'll speak out of my inexperience here, but are there metrics we could scrape from?
So what we probably should do is look at like the kubelet metrics and stuff like that. I don't think, is the Prometheus scraper, I think there's an issue on that actually, isn't there, about documenting
getting those published.
Because that's not in the list at the moment, but it is there, as you say, and it's actually, that's probably a good shout. I probably should add that, because then it'd be quite nice to see, like, you could get all the kubelet information, and you'd probably see how terrible it's handling all these containers. Let's go back and see if it's fallen over yet. Yeah,
there it is.
So it takes a while, but well, I say it's fallen over. I think it's still reasonable. Certainly the Loki output is a lot more performant than the Elastic output and the some of the others. So Loki seems to kind of keep up, but it's struggling, whereas some of the other outputs really don't like being run all on a single VM. But they work fine in production. I did actually spin up as a backup an Azure cluster as well with OpenShift on it, just as in case this didn't work. But I tested it on there as well. There's nothing inherently wrong with the configuration. It's just my VM is struggling a little bit to maintain all the containers.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right, so I think that was pretty much what I had covered on here. Have we had any questions come in, do you think, or is there anything else we'd like to cover?
Yeah, let me check here.
Yeah, because so we had a community meeting this week as well, didn't we? And there was some good conversation in that. Have we uploaded the recording of that yet? I can't remember.
I think I did, but it's not public yet, so
Yeah,
I'll have to go
but it's worth
modify.
yeah, because one thing that brought out was Windows, wasn't it? There was a lot of questions about what we're doing with Windows and Windows. There was discussion about Windows containers as well on ECS and things like that. So it's probably worth people jumping in and looking at the Google Docs. Got a link to the discussion where I talked about, do we want Windows containers? Which ones do we want? Like, what should we do with them?
Yeah.
But there's also a few other bits and pieces, and like, come join us and those kind of things. I think there's another one in 2 weeks, is it?
Yeah, we'll have another community meeting in 2 weeks. It happens every 2 weeks, and we'll I think we should just do a whole Fluent Talk session about it as well. There's a lot of good stuff in 1.9, especially that we added there, like our Windows event log was really focused before just on like 3 channels: application, security, and I can't remember the last one. But now the Windows event logs can actually go into like the custom Windows events, like your PowerShell events or your operational events. So that makes it a lot more robust, or a lot more useful, especially for Windows logging. And yeah, we could talk a little bit about that, and I think that will be a nice.
Yeah, because I mean, we touched on briefly, there's like the Prometheus scraper. It's not documented yet, but it is available, and I did have a little play with it. But yeah, probably should have integrated it. But there's things like the Kafka input as well. That's kind of announced there. But we've got a few other things as well. It's like the Nightfall redaction filter and Apache Skywalking plugin and things like that as well. So it's probably worth having a catch up on that at some point.
Yeah, exactly. Well, okay. Right. I think I don't see any questions in the chat here, so I think we're.
Yeah, hopefully I didn't say anything too controversial on those discussions about certified images. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm hoping this little OpenShift example is a good. So I did it just for specifically for OpenShift because it's about doing like a walkthrough, because you've got these extra security steps you have to do initially, but the output steps can just be used by anyone. If you're deploying a standard Helm chart when you don't need any of the security configuration, you can just use the output values and job done.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, awesome stuff. Okay, well, I think that's all we have for today. So thanks, folks, for tuning in, and really appreciate it. We'll look forward to hosting you next time. Bye for now.
See you guys.